Hi everybody, in English 1301, I wanted to offer you a video walking through the guidelines and expectations for week number 4, and also a few reminders and just things that I noticed from some previous posts that I want to address now, just so that there's no confusion and that you're getting some feedback about that. So the first thing I want you to note is a date that's coming up. It's June 23rd is the last day to withdraw from any of your summer courses without any penalty, right? That has nothing to do with financial aid or anything. It's just the penalty. You will not be penalized, right, with your GPA if you withdraw from the course. So that's on June the 23rd. That's, I hope, for other classes, right? I don't want you to be thinking about withdrawing from our course, but if that's something that you've been thinking about and concerned about, then definitely reach out to me, whether that's via email or during office hours. I want to have a conversation because there is a lot of course left. Even though there doesn't seem to be a lot of time left in the course, we have a lot of grades, right? So if you aren't so happy with what you're seeing in your grade now, know that we have some big assignments coming up with the paper topic portfolio and your multimedia project. So those can drastically change a grade for the better, I hope, right? Because they're large, or for the worse, right? If people aren't able to keep up, right? So just some things to keep in mind. I'm going to pull up your syllabus so we can walk through what we're doing this week, right? So for last week, I put the information to prepare. We have a couple of things to read and even a video, right? So for Wednesday's writing journal, you'll need to read Walk, Talk, Cook, and Eat, A Guide to Using Sources, and that's by Haller, right? And so that'll be posted in the content area of D2L and actually in the discussion post area for that specific topic. So this is just something that Haller kind of works through some of the ideas of utilizing sources, what to do, and it's in a really approachable format, right? So take some time to read through the article. You may want to set aside 2 different sessions to read through it because it is a bit longer, but it's so very useful. So your writing journal will be related to that. And you will need to respond to 2 colleagues by Friday, right? So you'll want to think about, the requirements because you have 2 things that'll be due on Friday. Your reading response is due then as well, and that will be related to not only the brief article by Lee, which is called Watch, the Little Known History of Asian Takeout in America, where she works through some of the ideas she also shares in the video that you'll also watch by her, which is entitled The Hunt for General So. So that's your reading response. That's due on Friday, along with your 2 responses for the writing journal. And then your paper topic discussion this week is going to be examining and connecting Hawthorne to Poe. I'm so sorry, that's an error for y'all's syllabus. I'm going to delete that. Your paper topic is not related to what I'm doing in my literature course. It is in fact going to be related back to the work that we read and address by Lee. Okay, so sorry for that confusion. I'm glad I caught that now, and I hope you're not confused in the future. My bad. I'm going to pull up the weekly discussion, or I'm sorry, the weekly expectation area, so you can see that we have links to all of, the video and the articles, and then the writing journal, right? The prompt here is really asking you to look at Haller's piece and to create an annotation, right, which is strictly summary. I was seeing some really great things in what y'all were doing with previous pieces and summarizing. I do want to hit on a couple of things about how to summarize and what to do, but first, you'll want 2 to 3 paragraphs for your annotation, right, which is just a summary, right? The object is to show your understanding, but also to really dig into Haller's arguments and ideas, okay? And then I want you to create a citation, right? If you were creating a works cited with Haller's piece included, you would need to create what we call a citation, right? Which is, the standard author's last name, comma, first name, the title. There's a very specific way to do this following MLA format. So I've provided you a couple of links. One of them is to a video that's really helpful. I'll pull up the website here, right? This is the University of South Carolina's library website, but this video right here is really great because the speaker, Jonathan Vossler, I believe, is going through how do we work to create these citations according to MLA. He uses a text as an example, but note that for every kind of piece that you use, whether it is like my example will be a book chapter, yours is an article, every different kind of genre of a piece means that a citation will look just a little bit differently, right? And that's because if I, as a person who's grading your work, am very familiar with MLA, I should be able to look at your citation, and based on how it is put together and the information included, I should be able to get a sense of what kind of source that is. Okay, and I also have, a link to the Purdue OWL website, which we're going to constantly use. That's going to be our source for all things MLA related. So there's some more information included in here, and I'm going to get a little bit more specific at the end of this video about MLA and citations, so just hang on for that. For the week 4 reading response, we'll be watching and reading works by Lee, and hers is really looking at her process of going through and working to find General Tso's chicken and the Americanized version of these different kinds of traditions and fusions in different food. So again, we're working on summary, so I want a single paragraph summary for the piece, right? And make sure you reference the title of each, right? So you have a single paragraph summary for not only the text, right, the brief article, but also the video. So make sure that in each of those paragraphs you're being specific, so you're not confusing your audience because it is the same author. Excuse me. Finally, I want you to choose 2 pieces of information, essentially one from each, and write a paragraph of analysis, right? So we don't want to get into summary. We've already worked on the summary. I want you to choose one thing from each piece that is interesting or relevant or something related to food that you learned or that you think is really important, and then expand on that and follow MLA guidelines. Remember that for every TED Talk, a transcript is included, so you can pull direct quotes. Make sure they're only brief. We don't need pages and pages of quotes, right? And then for the paper topic, you're going to go back to Lee's video and article and really push this notion of what we consider traditional, right? It's a term we throw around a lot when we think about food, as is the term authentic, but they both can be a little bit problematic because what do we even mean by that, right? So I want us to kind of engage and think about these things. So go back to Lee's work, and in a single paragraph, I want you to identify some of the things that she works through in terms of this notion of traditional food. Okay, what does she mean? What does it mean in the context of what she's talking about? So that's, one paragraph. In a second paragraph, I want you to think about what traditional means in your own food culture, right? We're kind of playing around and working through this idea of our own food culture. What do we mean when we say traditional? Okay, and that can be anything. It can be a traditional meal or practice or food or a specific ingredient. What do we mean by that? And I also go into this notion of why the terms authentic and traditional can be a bit problematic, because what do we mean by that? And sometimes those terms make it really easy to collapse food cultures and identities and things of that nature. And I use the example here of, what is traditional or authentic Mexican food? Well, that's an unfair and impossible question because there's no such thing, right? Because there's no singular Mexican food, right? Mexico is a big country with a lot of different regions, and all the food, varies from region to region, from space to space, from even family to family, right? So there's not something that we can identify and say, yes, this is the truly authentic Mexican food, because there are variations, right? We can note a specific kind of food, like in the US, maybe the hamburger is considered, a very traditional American food. But even a hamburger changes across region and region, and there are fights about what a more traditional hamburger is, right? Or a traditional Philly cheesesteak, or, we are impacted by region and location and our own traditions, right? So I want you to dig into some of that and consider what tradition means to you in your food culture. And then finally, I want you to work to identify something in your food culture that may have shifted or moved away from this notion of tradition or authenticity over time. Right? So are there things that are considered more fusion at this point? Is there a particular ingredient that, your grandparents and your parents used forever in this one particular dish, but that you can't get your hands on, right? Or have you changed your approach to food? You're trying to be maybe healthier, so you're substituting different ingredients, right? Or maybe it's that the person who always made this very traditional kind of meal is no longer here with us, so that things change. So we're really kind of pushing to, what is the new tradition or the new authenticity in our own food cultures, right? So in thinking about these things and wanting to provide an example, if I'm thinking about, tradition in my family, we are white Americans. We moved around a lot in the Air Force. You know, we're an Air Force family, but we had kind of the traditional white American Thanksgiving meal, right? We had turkey, we had you know, those corn and all those things. We had mashed potatoes, but a lot of times we also included rice, right? We included steamed rice on the table because we lived in countries where rice was just so much a part of our everyday food culture. And so that is not necessarily traditional or authentic when we're thinking about a Thanksgiving meal in my family, right? It may be traditional in other families, but those things change over time based on where we are. And then in thinking of things that have, you know, for identifying something that may have shifted or moved away from, you know, I'm thinking about the same meal when we did do mashed potatoes. We always did the heavy cream and lots of butter, but you know, when we're trying to avoid so much of the fat content and the calories and things, we're using like chicken stock or something to kind of replace that and bring the fat and calorie content down. So those are very basic examples, but I wanted to give you something to kind of get your wheels turning. Okay, I'm going back to this idea of MLA formatting, and I wanted to bring up Choi's work as the example because we've used her work to annotate and to summarize. And so a few things MLA based I want to kind of hit upon. The first is titles. Whenever we reference titles in our work, so in thinking about Lee's work in the upcoming week, we always want to refer to titles of articles in quotation marks. We want those to appear on the screen so that anybody reading it can go, oh, these quotation marks indicate that we're working with a kind of piece of work, in this case, an article. So when we think about Choi's work, we have what Americans can learn from other food cultures. Whenever you reference this text, this should be in quotation marks. That is MLA formatting, right? Anytime we think about an article, it needs to be in quotation marks. Also something that may seem kind of crazy, but that MLA wants, every word in the title needs to be capitalized. That is not what you see here, right? So that can throw us a little bit, but MLA says, because again, we want it to stand out on the page so that people recognize, oh, this is a title. The capitalization does this as well. So every word should be capitalized. MLA says that you don't need to capitalize things like conjunctions or prepositions. I say just capitalize everything to be on the safe side. That's okay. I don't care about that. Okay. So we want to make sure that we're following those kinds of guidelines, you know, when we're dealing with articles. Additionally, with when we're working with annotations, you want to really reference the author to avoid any implication or understanding that these are your ideas, right? They are not our ideas, they are Choi's ideas. So in this upcoming week, when you're summarizing, you need to go Haller. Haller states this, Haller identifies that, or Lee states this. You know, it may seem repetitive to do that all the time, but you're really emphasizing these are not my ideas. I am summarizing this other person, this other author's ideas. So using the author's name, always the last name. Always the last name, right? We don't know these people. We can't call them by their first names. We want to repeat and reference that quite a bit. I'm going to post this example of an annotation. This is just something I show students, you know, this is from when I was in grad school, right? So it's not perfect, but it provides a good example, not only of MLA formatting. I'm not requiring that you do any of this just yet. This is kind of down the line for your paper topic portfolio. You need the heading and the header. But then here is the citation, which you will have to do, right, for the upcoming week. You'll have to create citations for some of the pieces. So we have last name, comma, first name, the period, in quotation marks. I'm working with a book chapter, so yours is going to look a little bit different, and that's okay. Just look at the videos and look at the links. You have every line below the first in a citation indented. But then you'll note that when I start talking about Roberts' ideas in this chapter, I keep going back to her. Roberts connects the treatment. She explains, though her chapter. So in none of this am I talking about myself. I think this or I understand that. No, 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 no. It's all going back to Roberts, or for our week, Haller implies this, Haller identifies that, Lee writes this, you know, so I want us to make sure that we're formally addressing the summary and giving credit to whoever's ideas we're stating, right? All right, that's just a quick kind of cap of the week. If you have other questions, hit up that Q&A section. Thanks for participating in there, or shoot me an email. Hang in there, you guys. We're at the finish line. We're almost there. Keep it up.